Welcome. My name is Kathey Batey with the South Kent Chamber of Commerce, and it is election season, and we are going to have an opportunity to get to know one of our candidates. Unfortunately, Congresswoman Hillary Scholten was not able to make it with us tonight, but we do have and are delighted to have Paul Hudson with us. Just so you know, the Chamber is very nonpartisan. We are here to give you information so you can make the decision that you need to make as you go to the voting booth. Our candidate today is Paul Hudson, running for the 3rd District of Congress, and I would like to give him just a few moments to introduce himself. Welcome, candidate Hudson, and thank you for your time this evening.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you to WKTV and the South Kent Chamber for hosting this. It's a real pleasure to be here. As you said, I'm running for the United States Congress in the 3rd District, which now covers Grand Rapids, Grand Haven, Muskegon, and surrounding areas. Really one of the true battleground districts in the entire country, right here in West Michigan. I'm a proud husband. I've been married for 21 years to my wife, Jen. She's a rocket scientist, so she's the brains of the operation. And we have 2 kids, 16 and 14. And I'm running for Congress because I think there's a real sense in our country that we are not living up to our obligation to leave a better world for our kids than was left to us. So there's a real sense that we need change in this country, and we need a constructive style of leadership to bring about that change.
Wonderful, thank you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you a few questions just for us to help us get to know you better. And then I'm going to ask some local questions, some state questions, national, and then international. So there are many undecideds still out there. Hard to believe at this late hour that there are. How are you different, and how are your priorities better than the current serving Congresswoman?
Well, I think you're right. There are a lot of undecided voters out there, and particularly in the congressional race. These are highly polarized times. But this is one of the most purple districts in one of the most purple states in the country. It is not uncommon for families to have Republicans and Democrats and independents and disaffected voters and everything else all in one family, all on the same street. And I think the difference between me and my opponent, Hillary Scholten, is I really do believe that we need to come together as a country. I think we're all going to wake up on November 6th, and half the country is going to be very disappointed in the results of this election. We've always, as Americans, been able to come together, even after bruising election battles, to solve the problems of the nation. I think, unfortunately, what we've seen from Hillary Scholten is that although she has talked a good game about bipartisanship and being sort of centrist, when she got to Congress, the voting record didn't bear that out. And she has a 96% party line voting record. We have not seen sort of the constructive engagement with the other side that's necessary to be an effective legislator, to be an effective advocate on behalf of West Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let me ask you again, to get to know you better, who's your hero?
Yeah, my personal hero in life is my grandfather, Duffy Daugherty. Some people may have heard of him. He was the head football coach at Michigan State from 1954 to 1972. He won national championships for the Spartans, Big Ten championships. He was on the cover of Time magazine and is in the College Football Hall of Fame. But he wasn't just my hero, he was a true American hero. He fought for our country in the jungles of New Guinea during World War II. He enlisted as a private in the Army, worked his way all the way up to a major by the end of the war. And I had the opportunity to read his letters home from the war, and one of them jumped out at me because he fought in an integrated unit in the war, and that was a new experience for a guy from a very small coal mining town in Pennsylvania. And he said that experience of sort of having a group effort and people of all different races and religions from all over the country coming together in a common goal changed his perspective on life. And he brought that perspective back to Michigan State. He was a pioneer in racially integrating college football in the in the 50s and 60s. His 1965-66 national championship teams were the first truly integrated teams anywhere in the country. To me, that's what leadership looks like. That's what unifying leadership looks like. The theme of my campaign is Paul for all. And we need that style of leadership back in this country, where politicians aren't representing just their base or one segment of the voters. We need our leaders to be leading all of us. And so that's my commitment. If I'm elected to be the congressman for the 3rd District, I'm going to represent the whole district. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, or anything else, whether you voted for me or not. That's the job of a representative in Congress. And I draw on the inspiration of my grandfather in forming my perspectives on leadership.
Awesome. What keeps you up at night?
Well, what's keeping me up at night right now is politics are so divisive. It is an us versus them pitched battle. The political rhetoric right now is just off the charts apocalyptic, right? Where both sides are saying, this election is the end of the country as we know it if we don't win. It's dangerous. We've seen just in this cycle political violence erupt, assassination attempts. It's really corrosive to our politics. And the problem is, how are we supposed to sort of flip the switch after November 5th and then say, well, these people that we told you were evil and bad people and were out to destroy our country? How do we come together to solve problems again? The reality is we're going to have divided government most of the time in this country, meaning Republicans have one branch of government or one house of Congress, Democrats have the other, and the American people expect the job to get done even when everything's not lined up perfectly for you. It's just the nature of our system. And so what keeps me up at night is that things have drifted so far apart that it's getting harder and harder to come back together after an election.
Thank you. So at the Chamber, we believe that small business is the backbone of this country. What priorities will you have to create a supportive environment for small businesses?
Well, I think you said it exactly right. Number one, small businesses are the backbone of our economy, particularly here in West Michigan. You also said it right on creating the environment for small businesses. It's about creating a good business climate. The United States and West Michigan has a terrific entrepreneurial spirit, right? And if people are given good conditions to start a business, they will. And with the ingenuity, creativity, they will. What we've seen, unfortunately, though, is from bad policy making, it's harder and harder to run a successful business, whether it's a restaurant or a retailer or whatever it is, with inflation out of control like it is, with cost of gas and energy bills higher and higher. These small business owners are squeezed no matter what the industry is. That's what we need to get back to is, we need to focus on creating the better climate for small businesses to thrive.
Mm-hmm. I have with me 4 pages of proposed bills for small businesses. What do you believe that businesses really need to thrive? And can we get more specific? I know this is similar to the last question, but more specific.
Let me get specific about one aspect of that I think every single business, small business, no matter what particular business it is, its inflation has gotten out of control. And there was a cause for that. This isn't some mystery whodunit. The cause was irresponsible government spending from Washington. When you dump trillions of dollars of government money into the economy, which is what happened between 2021 and now, inflation is what happens, right? So specifically, we need to rein back on that spending in Congress. There's a bill in Congress called the Limit, Save, Grow Act, which I support. My opponent Hillary Skolden opposed. It sort of sets a structural limit. It resets the spending levels to previous years and then caps growth in spending to 1% over time. It can save $4.5 trillion over the next decade. Those are the kinds of modest, kind of common sense proposals that we need. The federal government is a big ship. We've been redlining the throttle on spending for the past 2 decades, and it's gotten out of control. But that's one thing that we need to do to get inflation back under control, is to stop the government spending.
So you're well aware, I'm sure, of the housing issues that we are seeing, lack of housing issues. How can the federal government support communities in creating more housing?
Yeah, we need to build more houses. You know, this is another one where there's a common sense answer to this. And it really doesn't matter what type of housing we build. We just need to cut the red tape for builders to be able to build in the communities. We're fortunate in West Michigan to be one of the only growing regions of Michigan and the Midwest. It's a good problem to have, but it also means that housing costs have skyrocketed. We have tens of thousands too few housing units in West Michigan right now. We need to build more housing. And the government's role in that, it shouldn't be, we've heard a lot of these sort of Band-Aid solutions coming out of Washington. Hey, let's give everybody 25 grand for a down payment on a house. The problem with that is all that does is make houses 25 grand more expensive for everybody. And in the meantime, we've added even more government spending to turbocharge inflation even more. It's the kind of economically illiterate proposals that are coming out of Washington right now, when really what we need to do is get government out of this a little bit, let the marketplace thrive. We have people in West Michigan who are looking for housing units. Let's let the builders build them.
Okay, thank you. What have you heard during your campaigning that small businesses want from local or from federal government?
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of economic gardening principles, right? People aren't looking for handouts or sort of goodies from the government. They just want a fair playing field and a good business climate, whether it's tax policy, whether it's cost of goods and you know, fuel for you know, transporting the goods, whatever it is. And so that's what they expect from government, is just sort of a sane fiscal policy that creates environment for growth.
Have you heard any specific answers on that?
One that I've heard repeatedly is where small businesses feel the weight of government is through regulations and through administrative agencies that are enacting those regulations. And one story I heard from a small manufacturer was they had an agency come in and tell them they had to stop sweeping their shop floor, and instead had to install a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 ventilation system in their business. And there were no safety concerns. The people that were sweeping were already wearing personal protective equipment. So this was just added cost imposed on this small business from the government, and sort of multiply that story across the system. And that's the sort of thing that's weighing small businesses down right now.
Thank you. Let's move on to the state. What are the 3 important Michigan issues that you will represent in Congress?
I think we've mentioned many of them. Fortunately, in this cycle, Michigan issues are national issues with all of the attention on Michigan politics. But we have a thriving downtown in Grand Rapids. I think it's really terrific to see sort of that public-private partnership. We need to make sure that people feel safe going downtown. And in communities throughout the region. So we need to support our law enforcement officers. We need to make sure they have the resources. That's what creates a thriving environment in the downtown.
Mm-hmm. So could you give me an example of public and private co-working together?
Yeah, I think there's a real strong culture in Grand Rapids and throughout West Michigan of the community coming together, working with government to get big projects done. Like, we have some exciting things that are happening here with the amphitheater development, with the soccer stadium coming, maybe with an aquarium around the corner. So these are terrific things. It's going to add a lot of attention and tourism to West Michigan. So those are the types of projects that we need to support.
The economy and inflation has hit Michigan hard. Manufacturing jobs are still vital to this state. What is your plan to help manufacturers in Michigan?
Yeah, I mean, I come from an automotive family. My dad worked for Chrysler for 30 years. The automotive industry is the backbone of Michigan's economy, not just in the Detroit area, but with suppliers in West Michigan as well. And one thing we've seen is, again, and it seems like a recurring story, but sort of over-involvement from Washington in the automotive business, specifically in the EV mandates, the tailpipe emission standards that are being imposed on our Michigan automakers, which are going to essentially require the Michigan automakers to make 2/3 of the vehicles electric or hybrid over the next several years. Don't get me wrong, I think the technology is great, right? And we're probably moving in that direction over time. The problem is when Washington steps in and mandates a quota on the numbers and a timeline for the automakers to get there, it's unrealistic, and it's really going to cripple our industry and cost us jobs here in Michigan.
Right. We have adversaries who are purchasing land in Michigan. Should this happen? And if so, how should this be managed?
I think there have been some serious questions, legitimate questions raised about a lot of these projects. The problem is there is a federal role for this in screening these projects. The process isn't robust enough. There's something called the CFIUS process, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. The role of that is supposed to be at the front end, identifying national security threats, identifying security threats so that the states know in advance, all right, is this posing a problem or not? Because the states, the incentive is let's bring these big projects to our state for the economic development, for the jobs. And if one state turns it down, then these projects can just move 100 miles south to Indiana, and you have all of the security concerns and none of the economic development. So what we need is to reform that CFIUS process to make sure we're screening these projects up front.
Thank you. National debt. No one's talking about it. Unfortunately, we are not a rich nation. We are trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. What is your plan?
Well, I've been talking about it nonstop. I think it's one of these. I think it's a huge issue going forward. And I started this with, are we leaving a better future for our kids? Right now, we're saddling them with $35 trillion of debt and growing. Right? That's not monopoly money. It's real money that we're starting to see the effects of that, because now we're paying more just in interest on that debt than we are for our entire Defense Department, right? Over $1 trillion in interest payments alone this year. That means your tax dollars, my tax dollars from all over West Michigan aren't going to schools and defense and all the things that we want government to be doing. We're just paying interest, $1 trillion of interest. So it's not sustainable. We've gone from $5 trillion in debt 20 years ago, early 2000s, to $35 trillion now. And to be clear, both parties are very much to blame in this. And we've seen dramatic run-ups in the debt under Republican leadership and Democratic leadership. But we have to get it we have to get it under control.
Mm-hmm. So here's a story that's been in the news. Virginia Governor Youngkin tried to remove non-citizens from the voting rolls, and the Federal Appeals told them they had to reinstate. How do we protect the integrity of our votes?
It's really important that everybody has trust in the election process, right? It's the bedrock of our democracy. And we've seen some of that trust eroded, and I think there are common sense things that we can do to restore some of that trust. And things like requiring ID or requiring proof of citizenship the first time you register to vote. I think that's common sense stuff that we could figure out as a society how to pull that off, and it would do a lot to restore the confidence in our elections.
Yeah. You have a national plan, your GPS plan, which stands for Growth, Prosperity, and Security. It wants to lower government spending. Where is the first place that you would start in lowering government spending?
I think what the bill that I mentioned, the Limit Save Grow Act, I think is a really good place to start, because it's not just chipping away at one thing or another. It is actually placing some structural limitations on Congress itself, right? And that's the problem right now, is that people get to Congress and the incentive is to spend more, because then they can try to bring more of that back to their districts, and they can make people happy by spreading some money around. So I think that's the kind of common sense reform that we need, because it's not just sort of playing at the edges. It really is. We need to rein in Congress itself. I would also like to see us move to a balanced budget amendment. State governments have to balance a budget. Families have to balance a budget. Right now, we're nowhere close. We have about $5 trillion in tax revenue coming in. That's a lot of money. It should be, it should be enough to fund a federal government, right? Unfortunately, the budget right now is $7.3 trillion, and so every single year we're running up another $2 trillion and change on the nation's credit cards. So I think again, we need some structural reform that reins in the incentives in Congress.
What type of structural reforms would you like to see? Well,
those two that I mentioned, the Limit Save Grow Act and the Balanced Budget Amendment, I think would go a long ways. And then I think, frankly, we just have a bloated administrative bureaucracy in Washington. I think we could rein in, we could cut budgets in most federal agencies by, say, let's start with 5–10%, and not one person in the entire country would notice a change, right? Just because it's bloat. It is. It's not doing anything for the American people. It's just sort of the Leviathan has grown over time.
So here's a question for you: are people better represented by adding more members to the Supreme Court?
No. No, I think it is very dangerous territory when people start proposing, dramatic changes like that to an institution like the U.S. Supreme Court. Usually, it's because they've started not liking the results, and they're trying to pack the court in their favor. I'm a lawyer. I've been the head of an appeals group. My cases are in the Michigan Supreme Court, the federal courts of appeals. I've had cases in the United States Supreme Court as well. I revere these institutions, and I think it's a really harmful trend that people are undermining venerable institutions like the United States Supreme Court. If we're committed to the rule of law, if we're committed to democracy, we need to be supporting our institutions rather than undermining them.
There was a proposed border security bill that went to Congress, and it was defeated. A lot of blame has been given to Congress for not making our border secure. Should it have passed? And if not, what would a bill look like that would secure our border?
Yeah, I think this has been a dramatic policy failure by this administration. We've had over 10 million illegal crossings in just the past few years. Whatever your thoughts are on the best border security policy, this has been an outright failure. I think almost everybody can recognize that at this point. It's a big difference between me and my opponent, Hillary Scholten. She has advocated for quote unquote freedom of movement, open borders policy. That was her background as an immigration activist. That's the perspective she took to Congress. And then she has voted against every single border security bill that has reached the floor of the United States Congress, including the Secure the Border Act in April, May of 2023. And that bill would have done a lot to probably the strongest border security bill ever. She voted against that. Even this summer, right, where almost everybody realized this was a horrific situation at the border. President Biden issued executive orders essentially undoing some of the bad policy that had been in place. She even opposed that. So, you know, I think that's been a failure in her record. We've got the worst of both worlds right now. We're a nation of immigrants. I strongly support legal immigration. The problem is you have to jump through 100 hoops and wait 5 years to do it the right way. Meanwhile, the southern border is wide open. And think about it this way as well. You know, this doesn't come from any sort of nativism or xenophobia or anything else. We have immigration laws for a reason, and we need to enforce them. And for example, we've had dozens, I think hundreds, of known or suspected terrorists across the border in recent years. We don't know where all of them are. And so think about that. You know, I sort of came of age in the 9/11 generation. And for the past 20 plus years, we've all been taking our shoes off at the airport. Our grandmas are getting, you know, full body scans at the airport. It's a hassle, but we're all sort of willing to do it to keep ourselves safe. We've been doing all of that, and then we're letting known terrorists or people with known terrorist ties to come into our country. I think that's the sort of, it doesn't make any sense to people. I think that's why folks have been so frustrated with the record of this administration and with Hillary Scholten.
If you were elected, what committees or task force would you want to serve on and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mentioned I'm a lawyer, so a Judiciary Committee would be a natural fit there. We have a strong transportation and manufacturing economy here in Michigan, so Transportation and Infrastructure Committee would appeal to me as well. But what I've told folks is, listen, we have enough people in Washington, enough show ponies in Washington. Put me to work, right? There are serious problems to work on, no matter what committee you're on in Congress. And if you're one of the people that's willing to put their head down and get to work, that's how you can have influence in Congress, and it's how you can deliver results for your constituents.
You have touched on this, but I'd like to make another point that crime rates are up, and for multiple reasons. What is the federal government's role?
Well, I think it's a couple things. We had a trend recently of not respecting the rule of law, and you know, we saw that in cities across the country of, you know, not enforcing shoplifting laws, or only enforcing them after someone stole, you know, $900 or $1,000 or something like that. We need to get back to a commitment to enforcing the rule of law, and then we need to make sure that we are supporting our law enforcement officers who are dedicating their lives in a dangerous profession and doing a great public service. So we need to make sure that they have the resources that they need. They're keeping all of us safe so that we can sleep soundly at night, and we need to support them in their efforts.
So we'll move over to the international. How much have we spent supporting Ukraine, and when do we stop supporting them?
Yeah, this is a complicated issue, and a lot of foreign policy is sort of choosing between two bad outcomes, right? And so nobody likes sending money overseas. You know, as we mentioned, we've got $35 trillion of national debt here. We've got problems at our border. We've got problems in our cities. We've got all kinds of issues that Americans would love to see their tax dollars being spent on. On the other hand, the world is a dangerous place, and it always has been, and it always will be. And what we've seen over the past few years is that when bad actors sense weakness from the United States, that's when they act. And I think that's what we saw with Vladimir Putin in Russia. He sensed weakness. He sensed that America maybe wasn't going to stand up to him. And so I did support the supplemental assistance to Ukraine and Israel. Putin told us what he's going to do. He wasn't going to stop until somebody stopped him. So I think that was appropriate to provide weapons and munitions assistance to Ukraine to make sure that Putin didn't just roll over that sovereign nation and continue on to whatever terrible things that he was going to do. Going forward, I think that we're at the stage now where people aren't really sure what the end game here is and what is the goal for the United States if there's another request for assistance from the United States Congress. I think the president, whoever our next president is, has an obligation to explain to the American people specifically what the ask is, specifically what the tax dollars, the American tax dollars, are going to be spent on, and then what's the end game of this conflict? What are we hoping to accomplish, and what's the timeline for making that happen?
So your opponent, Hillary Scalton, voted no on H.R. 1469, ensuring accountability for key officials during the Biden-Harris administration for decision-making and execution failures of withdrawing from Afghanistan. Are you familiar with this bill and your thoughts?
Yeah, I think if we want to trace one of the root causes of all of the escalating tensions we see around the world right now in Russia, Ukraine, in the Middle East, in the Red Sea, with China on, acting more aggressively in the Pacific. One of the root causes of that was our botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. I think that showed bad actors around the globe that, hey, maybe America isn't what we thought they were, and maybe now is the time that we go in and and we advance our interests because America isn't going to do anything about it. So, no, I think it's unfortunate. I think that it dishonored our men and women in uniform the way we left that war. I think everybody agreed it was time to responsibly disengage from that conflict, but the way it happened was disgraceful.
So should the decision makers be held accountable?
Certainly. If you're a decision maker in Washington and you don't do the job right, then you should be held accountable for that.
Speaking of accountability, how should Congress be held accountable for their finances? We do see a lot of congressmen, different politicians who go in relatively without a lot of money, and then somehow magically they're very wealthy when they leave. What accountability should be in place for Congress and all elected offices? Yeah,
I mean, isn't that something, right? Magically, they become brilliant stock traders. No, I think that erodes the public trust. This is a public service that you're doing when you go into Congress. You're not there to get rich or to profit off of your job. And so I support a ban on congressional stock trading. There are just too many opportunities for conflicts of interest there. So let's do that right away. There's really no reason that members of Congress should be trading stocks. I think that would go a long way in restoring the public trust. There's a reason that Congress has something like an 11% approval rating right now. It's both the inaction, but then it's also a sense that people aren't there for the right reasons.
My final question, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to wrap up. If you are elected, do you promise to attend South Kent Chambers Government Matters monthly meeting?
Yes.
Okay, we have it on record.
All right.
So we would appreciate that. And I'd like to give you just a couple minutes to wrap up, to speak on any topic that we have not covered, and whatever you care to say.
Well, Well, I really appreciate your time and going out of your way, and obviously terrific preparation in the questions. I think what's unfortunate is the absence of Hillary Skolden here is noticeable. This was a forum where both candidates were invited. I've enjoyed the conversation and answering questions. I think it is a part of the job as a member of Congress to stand up and debate your opponent. I think that's a healthy part of the democratic process. We can do it respectfully. There's going to be no name calling or any of the nonsense that we see. But Hillary Skolden has dodged all of our efforts to schedule a debate, and obviously she decided not to be here this evening as well. I think that's a really harmful trend. People want to see what their member of Congress is all about. They want to see that person answer tough questions, and they want to be able to see the people on the same stage and compare and contrast and decide who they want to vote for. To me, that's an obligation of a member of Congress, particularly a relatively unknown freshman member of Congress. She should relish the opportunity to get in front of her constituents and explain what she's all about and defend her record. Because the other part of this is, if anybody has turned on their TV in the past couple of months, you've probably seen some nasty attack ads against me by Hillary Skolden, right? And to me, if you're willing to lob attacks against your opponent, you should at least have the courage to stand on a stage and say it to that person's face. So I think it's an unfortunate thing that Hillary decided not to be here today and has decided to dodge every attempt at a debate as well.
Okay, well, we appreciate your time and your willingness to be here. And again, Hillary Skolden did have a calendar conflict, but I appreciate your time and your willingness to be here and to answer the questions that you did not know ahead of time. So with that, we will thank you. We will encourage you to become part of the South Kent Chamber, to make sure that you go to the polls and be informed on who it is that you are voting for. Thank you, WKTV, as always, partnering with us to do incredibly important work such as candidate forums today. Thank you and have a good evening.